Right.
what was about to happen was just mind-blowing. So I would get pregnant with my second daughter. She was resilient from the start. She
Uh-huh.
stayed in the womb when her other siblings had not. So that already was a testament to the strength of her spirit. But you have to understand, I was pregnant during COVID, and
Right.
COVID was a different era altogether for prenatal health. And
Yes.
it was actually conducted in parking garages. If
It
Yeah,
was.
so yeah, curbside service. That's one thing you just don't really expect to be a curbside
No.
service,
No.
right?
Greetings and salutations. Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, where our ongoing goal is to help our listeners live their best audacious life ever. And we certainly do that through inspiration and empowerment. It's always a pleasure to have you here with us. And I thank our listeners for taking the time out of their day to join us on this journey of growth and self-discovery. Now, when you think about life, it's very much like a navigation system with tough decisions that serve as road signs. Just as a way a driver must choose the right path to reach your destination, we must make tough decisions in life to move forward on our own audacious journey. Now, Nicole Smith is a dedicated advocate and for dignity and empowerment, whose personal journey and experiences have led her to create impactful change in the world of disabilities and human rights. In this episode, Nicole shares her powerful story of resilience, advocating for her own daughter, and finding purpose in life's challenges. Her journey exemplifies the strength and determination required to overcome obstacles and live authentically. It's a powerful story that I'm certain you'll all enjoy, and so I'd say sit back and check out my conversation with Nicole. Hey, Nicole, thank you for joining me here today on the Audacious Living Podcast. I appreciate you taking the time to be here, so thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no, we spend much time on our podcast, encouraging individuals to live their best audacious lives, as we say, and as we go through life. I think we all know as we go through life, there will be obstacles, there'll be pitfalls, there'll be turbulence that we encounter, and as much as we want to stop and we want to give up, we don't want to go forward. It is incumbent on us to move forward, because when we move forward, we're one step closer to that success that we're supposed to achieve. But what we're also doing is we're fortifying ourselves and giving us that strength to move forward and get through the
Mhm.
obstacles, because there's going to be another one. I remember a few years ago, I was a commissioner of a basketball league, and
Mm.
one of my models was so anytime there was a situation on the court that needed some intervention, or something, a decision made, maybe a player did something naughty and had to be suspended or what have you, that would come to me to make those rulings. And ultimately, the approach I took is deal with it as swiftly as possible, because I got another game coming tomorrow, right?
Yeah,
And there's
yeah,
probably something in that game I have to deal with, and if I don't deal with that one in time, it'll be something else, and so it compounds. And so the idea is fortifying ourselves, getting ourselves as strong as possible, and moving forward. And so, a big preamble for an introduction to you. Thank you for being here. And
yeah.
maybe as a starting point, we can ask you to maybe inform our listeners a little bit about your journey, your story, what got you up into this point.
Yeah, so it's kind of a winding road, as most journeys are. I actually had a wonderful growing up with two very dedicated parents
Mhm.
to my spiritual, emotional, mental, and physical health. So I was very, very lucky. They were also deeply philanthropic minded. So that service mindedness would prepare me for the career path that I inevitably ended up being on. And so when I ended up in my career, I have an education background in political science and law and public policy. And I ended up on the global human rights communication side of the global human rights movement. So
Right.
that's sort of how I ended up in my career path. But I would take on many difficult topics throughout my career, but none so much as the day that I gave birth to my second daughter, which really has, I say, given flesh and bone to the mission that I have in life. But I'll say, so I kind of like to back up a little bit. Our story kind of begins actually a year after I gave birth to my first daughter, I would sustain a physical ailment that would put me in mind-bending pain 24/7
Yeah.
for 3 years straight. And in my pursuit of solutions, that 3 years, I also had not just pain, but also I had infertility. So I wasn't able to conceive a child. In my pursuit of solutions, I would be enter into another season, which was a season of miscarriages. So I like to say that because it kind of just lays the foundation for what would happen next. Little did I know, right? So I never thought it could get any worse than those 4 years, but buckle up, Buttercup. That's that's
Mhm.
really
Right.
what was about to happen was just mind blowing. So I would get pregnant with my second daughter. She was resilient from the start. She
Mhm.
stayed in the womb when her other siblings had not. So that already was a testament to the strength of her spirit. But you have to understand, I was pregnant during COVID, and
Right.
COVID was a different era altogether for prenatal health. And
Yes.
it was actually conducted in parking garages. If, yeah.
Really?
So yeah, curbside service. That's one thing you just don't really expect to be a curbside
No.
service, right?
No. No.
So if you were deemed low risk, most of it was telehealth. And what would happen is that at 36 weeks, you get a test and it tells if you have certain kind of infections. And I would go into labor at 37 weeks without those tests. And that's very important because without having those tests, they didn't want to touch me because they were afraid of introducing an infection to me or the baby.
Yes.
And so after a 27.5 hour labor, I was touched very, very seldom. And at 27.5 hours, 27 hours, I was starting to display signs of distress. My daughter was. And so at this point, they bring a doctor in. The doctor decides like, hey, sweetheart, we haven't checked you, but we think it's probably best if we do at this point. So she proceeds to stick her hand up and check how far along I am and if there's anything wrong. And she yells out, prolapse cord, alarms go off. Medical professionals are rushing in, everybody's jumping on the gurney, and I don't know what that means. I've never heard
Right.
of a
Right.
prolapse
Right.
cord.
Right.
And I just obviously know that this is bad. So a prolapse cord is when the umbilical cord comes out in advance of the baby and cuts off oxygen flow. So I did not have an epidural. And since my daughter was suffocating to death, my husband was unable to be wheeled to go to the OR. So it was like very emergent. Everybody's jumping on the gurney with me. They're going to the
Yeah.
OR. They're
Right. Right.
ripping my limbs every which way. I don't have an epidural, so I feel a catheter. I
Everything.
feel everything. And so we're like 10 minutes into this scenario in which I'm just like, okay, what's going on? And one little single tear comes down my cheek, and this beautiful, wonderful anesthesiologist just takes pity on me and says, I know, dear, this is very scary for you, but we do it every day. I said, well, yes, ma'am, but I've been breathing into this thing for 10 minutes. Are you just going to rip her out of me? Which is
Right.
fine if she's dying,
Right.
but what's going to happen? She says, no, you're going to go under general anesthesia. And with seconds after that, I was out like a light. And when I would wake up, I didn't have a baby in my arms for hours. And for those of you who don't know, if you go under general anesthesia without an epidural or a spinal tap to kind of, you feel everything.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So they put me on a narcotic pump to try to chase the pain, but it never quite caught up. So I ended up being just stoned out of my mind, and not the best way. I was just delirious, couldn't figure out where I was and what was going on, and mind-bending pain. My husband was in the recovery room with me, and he didn't know much. They just kind of ripped me away. He's just standing there. He knew he just needed to pack his bags because he wasn't going to stay in the room. They did
Right.
come in at one point to tell him that I was okay and the baby was okay, but they didn't say anything else. So finally, about 4 hours later, they would bring Cosette, my daughter, to me, and we would go into a series of 4 days that was deeply disturbing. So in that 4 days, we started to notice some very erratic behavior from her. So if she was awake, her body would seize up, like her whole limbs would oscillate, her eyes would roll full in the back of her head, full wide eyes. She
Okay.
couldn't latch, suck, swallow. She barely woke up. She never felt pain. It was just a lot of like warning bells going off.
Right.
And so the day 4, they would transfer us into NICU, but this was COVID. So my husband was unable to attend with me. A day or so in, we're starting to obviously realize something's going on. So I had the wherewithal to sort of just start walking a lot to try to
Okay.
walk the epidural.
Right.
I mean, not the epidural, the pain of the whole thing off.
Right.
And
And the I guess there's some numbness a while
yeah,
ago.
well, not really. I mean, that's kind of the opposite. So
Okay.
I had to go full cold turkey off of any type of narcotic or anything,
Okay.
because if you were to continue to take drugs, then you can pass it through your breast milk to the child. And she was already not waking up. So I was afraid that once she did start eating, I didn't want to like literally drug her.
Yeah.
So I just kind of just push through, it's like that mama bear type
Yep.
instinct to hold. And so when we were transferred, they were kind. They let my husband Kyle walk across the sky bridge, drop us off, and then that was it. It was me and the baby. And when something like this happens, so they didn't really tell us what happened, by the way. I actually would find out later on. But when newborns display troubling signs, they do a full gauntlet of tests. They just genetic, infection, brain damage, the whole thing. So like she's getting spinal tap, she's getting MRIs, she's getting brain scans, she's getting EEGs, she's getting all this stuff. So that alone was overwhelming, just kind of trying to keep track of all the things that they were trying to do and all the stuff. And NICU, intensive NICU, there's no bed to lay down in. So they kind of give you a raffle. You might go into what's loosely defined as a hotel room at the end of the day if you're chosen in the raffle. Right. And you go shower, you sleep, you put your stuff in a locker the next day. And for me, I'm still healing from this massive surgery. At night, my body would go almost into full scale shock, and I would shake for hours on end, just trying to heal. This is just very overwhelming. And so we were in NICU for about a month in total, but about 3 weeks in, I would overhear the nurses during their shift change, and they mentioned in her medical history that she had been resuscitated. This is not something they shared with me at all. So essentially, Cosette had been born basically dead, and they had to resuscitate her during the birthing process. And a few days later, I would have that confirmed in our insurance claim, $746 for resuscitation of newborn infant. So essentially, she had low oxygen flow for the 27.5-hour labor, and then she was without oxygen in totality for 10 to 15 minutes. And the end result is brain damage. And 6 months, she would receive the formal diagnosis of cerebral palsy. And for those that don't know what that is, it's essentially a neuromotor dysfunction. So you have brain damage, and the brain cannot understand your body in space. It can't control your muscles, and that's all muscles, not just like the muscles you see, but muscles like in your esophagus, mouth, like all these things that control. So for her, in order for her to leave the hospital, she had a gastric tube inserted because she was unable to self-feed, which is they pin the abdominal cavity to the stomach, and they put a tube through that. In order, because anything that was coming through down here was going directly into her lungs. She's aspirating, she gets pneumonia, she dies.
Right.
So she also had issues with swallowing really anything. So her spit was a danger to her. And which means that 5, 6, 7 times a day, even, she would turn blue from being unable to breathe or manage even the spit in her own mouth. So it was very, very traumatic. There's pumps and there's monitors and all this stuff that comes home with us. And I have a 5-year-old daughter, nearly 5-year-old daughter at this point. So just lots to consume, to understand and to adapt to. And still COVID, people weren't unable to come and help. My husband was seen as essential, so he left the school we sent our 5-year-old to, never shut down. So it became a very isolating period in my journey with my daughter. Every day was a very, very scary event. Again, all the monitoring, all the choking, like
Yes.
chronic illness, just everything you can imagine rolled up into one little ball for me to tend to every day. And so I will say though, this is 4 years down the road now. And while she had all of those symptoms, today she is G-tube free, which means she's able to drink and eat on her own.
Right.
She now is able to breathe. She still has some issues, but it's
Sure.
wonderful. I love that she can breathe. That's my favorite thing about her. And she still cannot walk, but she is working very hard. She walks in a little walker. She is nonverbal, but she uses sign language and to communicate her needs. And she is the determined little one that is declaring victory over her own life every day. So things have changed a lot throughout this journey of advocacy with her. So yeah.
A beautiful story. I mean, from the very beginning, it, wow, beautiful, and the resiliency. I wonder, Nicole, if you could encapsulate the last 4 years in one or two words, what would you say?
Oh, just empowering,
Yeah.
empowering. Purpose. If those are the same, but yeah, I know that our Western sentiment tends to say that we can success ourselves out of struggle. And I think that's one of the most dangerous things that an individual can believe, because the reality is every single human person struggles in
Yes.
one way or another. And there is no way we can escape that reality. And it's interesting to me through this whole process. I kind of always like to tell the story. So I have a daughter that exemplifies everything that culture says
Hmm.
is desirable. My oldest daughter is smart and beautiful and powerful. You know, she's a wonderful young little one. And then I have the other one that society says is pitiable, and it's, you know, hardship and that kind of stuff. And so I'd have these hours in which I actually started building like this music playlist that I would do, and I'd play during therapies with her so that I could essentially pray over and contemplate over. And there
Yes.
was actually this one song that came through that it was such an interesting concept. So the song is about wishing your child pain,
Okay.
because through pain is where refinement and growth comes, right?
Yep. Yep.
And so I'd sit and contemplate on my two daughters' paths. And what society would say about them, you know,
Yep. Yep.
that one is desirable, one is undesirable. And here I'm just sobbing over the reality of my baby and the struggle that she has, but that she is blessed because she has an intimate relationship with struggle,
Yes.
where
Yes.
I have to falsify that for my oldest, because where struggle lies, then is birth purpose,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So we don't like it. Okay,
Well,
so
and it's
let's
exactly, you know, it's
and
funny.
nobody wants it.
No, I was thinking the exact same thing. I mean, don't
Yeah,
tell me I gotta have pain. Don't tell me it's good for me. Like,
yeah,
right? You don't want to hear that, but
no.
there is definitely truth to it.
Yeah. And so I would say, you know, especially when you're walking this path, because,
Right.
you know, it's my daughter is struggling and she's in pain, and it's terrible, right? But I have my own parallel path along with her, right? So to of struggle and pain and growth that I never wanted. But looking back, it was deeply empowering. It was
Yeah.
deeply it was a point in which my purpose was really like transcendent. I'm a mom, so I already was a mom at that point. So I already understood purpose, because
Sure.
motherhood is just, and fatherhood,
Hmm.
our maternity and our paternity is a lot of where our strength is derived from in this world. That's not something that we often talk about. Oftentimes it's our career, but really like the strengths that we exemplify in our maternity and paternity are what embolden us outside of, that experience in our careers. So I already kind of understood that, but when you have to really just really advocate for your kid, really understand their needs and the ins and outs of the system and all this stuff. It was I mean, like drinking from a fire hose, but it was very empowering. And it really advanced the work that I was doing even outside the home as well. So yeah.
Mm. As a father to my daughter who's on the autism spectrum, I have a bit of perspective as well and
Mhm.
understand. She was diagnosed at the age of 3 or 4, rather. I think that's they wait before they give
Yeah,
official
yeah, yeah.
diagnosis to
Hmm.
ensure that. And she'll be 20 in a few days and a few months rather, and to watch her journey. I mean, her verbal skills are quite limited, but she has the ability to
Hmm.
impact a room. She has the
Yeah.
ability to leave a lasting memory with others,
Mhm.
and so when we look at um, and it's only natural to zero in on the deficits and what's not there.
Yeah.
Um, but
Instead
when
of
you look,
focusing on the things that
right,
are.
and when you focus on what they are, and I will tell you, I'm a father of three, and my daughter who's delayed speech on the autism spectrum, who's more like maybe 11 or 12-year old than a 20-year-old. Um, her impact on society is just massive,
It
and
is.
yeah, I think it's that whole thing of looking beyond the deficits and what's not there.
Yeah, and it realigns our perspective. So if you don't
It's,
have an intimate relationship with that reality, with the person that doesn't align with cultural standard of what is right or good, true, right?
yep,
It takes people out of boxes,
that's
right?
right.
And we're not, none of us are supposed to be in boxes, but in culture we put,
Put them, yep.
it's easier to put people, groups in boxes because we can deal with the box, right? But when you have a child that's outside of that box just by nature of being themselves, it removes yourself from the box. You're like, hey, God gave me these unique giftings that I should celebrate and cherish. My daughter that's normal, quote normal, same thing. My husband, like all these people around us, we kind of start to get a realign with the truth that we're all different. We're not supposed to be the same. And we all have our unique challenges and our unique giftings that we just should embrace by nature of it. So honestly,
Yeah.
she is a gift in that there was this beautiful alignment. And my oldest daughter, like every single day, she gets to be the cheerleader that,
Yes,
and
yes.
and through her sister she sees that for herself as well, and it's just this beautiful, it's beautiful. It really is.
I remember we annually would through the school board. The school board would call on all the parents with children who had special needs in like May, and the whole idea was to prepare for the upcoming fall.
Yeah,
And so
yeah, okay.
they bring us in around May to talk about certain things that what could be made available, what kind of supports were being offered, and I could vividly recall sitting in the room with a bunch of other parents. And now, at that time, my daughter's speech was severely delayed.
Mm.
Her gross motor skills were off the charts. In fact,
Well, that's
she
cool.
was very always been communicative, like expressively. Like
Yeah,
she,
yeah.
she has a desire to communicate, but wasn't
Hmm.
able to articulate. And so I'm sitting here, and knowing what I know about my daughter, I'm looking around the room and I listen to parents talk about feeding tubes for their children and wheelchairs and all sorts, and that wasn't my reality. And it was at that I remember sort of around that time my thinking started to shift again from that
Mhm.
deficit to what I have, and not that I'm making, oh well, someone else has got it worse. That's not the message,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
right? But it's very much sort of understanding where I'm at and appreciating what I have, and using that as a as a launch pad forward, as opposed to, well, I don't have what we do and we're stuck, kind of a thing, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Makes
yeah.
sense.
And to prevent yourself from lessening as
Sure.
well,
Yep.
because the reality is, so cerebral palsy never gets worse in the sense you never
Right.
get more brain damage, but cerebral palsy does affect the body externally.
Yes.
So over time, it wears down your muscles, your joints, and things can change. But there's no reoccurring medical intervention like to support the liver or support the
Right.
heart,
Right.
or
Right.
there's a lot of I don't know, a weird way of saying benefits. There's a difference, right? Risk rewards, maintaining of quality of life, and all the other things that I went through. And I do think there was a time where I kind of were like, well, I'm not that, so it's, I shouldn't complain, right? It's
Yep.
like almost like lessening the reality of what
Yep.
we went through because it was very, very hard. It's just that my journey with my daughter was different than a mother that has a child with a heart condition or a liver condition or whatever. So yeah, and I think I always kind of try to also, point out that it's really important to lean into those feelings a bit. So in a balanced manner. So if you ever really want to find joy in the moment, where whatever reality that you live in, it's really important to allow yourself to grieve.
Yes.
Okay. So really the reality that I came to terms with is that most of our struggles in life is because life is not meeting our expectations and we're grieving those unmet expectations. So, it's and even those reasonable expectations, very reasonable for me to get pregnant easily and not have miscarriages and have a child that doesn't have brain damage. Those are all very reasonable expectations, are they not? But those times of grief and those heartaches is me a lot not allowing me to find joy because I am grieving that she's not meeting my expectations,
Right.
right? So, and you have to take the moment to grieve those unmet expectations, and then from that you can heal and find joy. So those that get stuck and not grieving the unmet expectations, it's incredibly hard to find joy. So I always encourage people, when those moments where you feel sad for doesn't seem like there's an apparent reason, lean into that, examine those feelings, and then move on. Like, it's very
Hmm.
important. So I always give this example. So the other day, like your beautiful daughter, my daughter is nonverbal, so she's very, very smart. She understands what's going on, but she's getting better at sign language, but she's still pretty limited. We were at pickup, and one of the moms of her friends was just sort of saying, this is Friday, and I really hope they were able to do show and tell, because if they don't do show and tell, I'm going to hear about it all weekend
Right.
long.
Right.
She's gonna be really upset and just go on and on and on about how it was terrible, it didn't happen. And I got in the car and I cried. I cried because my daughter can't tell me that she wasn't able to have
Right.
show and tell, or to say that she could, or to tell us about her friends. We actually had to print off pictures of all the kiddos in her class so that she could tell us, because not all of them have sign names.
Yes.
So she has to be able to point, like, I played with this little girl today, or this little boy. These are my friends today. So, yeah, I mean, that was a moment where I call it's an opportunity. This is an opportunity. Got to look at it through a positive. I needed to have the opportunity to grieve through an unmet expectation so that I can have joy, because she
Yes.
can
Yes.
communicate, because she does have breath. She is here. She is alive. Just to celebrate those joys with her. So
Yeah.
yeah.
No,
Mhm.
much is to be said to celebrate. I think celebrating the joys is a great framing, right? A great way
Yes.
of framing it in your own minds. And so, you so but it didn't stop there for you in terms of what came out of that, because you've now moved into sort of advocacy work.
Yeah,
You want to sort
yeah.
of talk about that and how that sort of came about?
Yeah, so the concept originally really
And
came.
I gotta say, like, you've got enough on your plate as is,
Yeah.
right? So to hear this, like, whoa, okay,
Well, I know. I don't know. It's kind of one of those things. For me, personality wise, I really am deeply oriented towards that. I need something outside of my own bubble, or else I get sort of like crazy.
okay,
Like
fair
I
enough.
lose my mind a little bit. So,
Yep.
um, yeah, so I have a nonprofit. The origin of it actually originated from my global human rights work. I really noticed that within cultures all around the world, you can pretty much do anything to anyone if you deem them subhuman. And
Mm,
all cultures do it in some different way. It's not unique to one culture or another. They
right.
do it in all of them, right? And really, if culture understood the inherency of and the value of human life, then they're much less likely to hurt other humans, right? So,
Yes. Yes.
but when I gave birth to Cosette, that mission was given flesh and bone, and really we wanted to be a connective point for families and the organizations that are intended to meet them. And so we do educate, but we also do advocacy work, but we also have a bridge service. And this is multi-topic, but to me, my heart is in the disability space. So
Sure.
essentially you're thrown out of NICU, you have no idea what's
Yeah.
going on, you have
Yep.
no idea what's out there or even your needs. And so how do you navigate life when you have no idea what's out there? So essentially we have a service that will take a family, identify all of their needs and connect them to all of the organizations that can meet their needs along their journey. Because needs are not made in a vacuum. You don't have one need at a time, you have many needs at a time. And sometimes you're so overwhelmed, you have no clue what you need. So we bring together parents and caregivers, and they help us inform our process to really make our service very robust for families that are going through something very similar. So yeah, so Dignity Defense Institute is the name, and dignitydefense.org if you would like to learn more about us. You can just
Mhm.
select the contact form too if you actually need help. So
No, no. Again, that's fabulous. Again, I don't know how you find the time, and and so on time. And you also podcast too, and as a podcast,
oh yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
know it's
And
involved in time, and I mean, like, wow.
yeah, so the podcast it's got a similar mission to this, and really it's to take a lot of these different challenging scenarios, paths that people have gone on, tell their story, and in the midst of it, celebrate dignity and to be the champion of dignity, even in hardship, which is the time in which it's very easy to throw away our value is when
Yes.
life gets hard.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's
Mhm.
the core of it.
No,
So
you're right. When things get difficult, that's when when things
yeah,
get difficult, that's when you have to be even more committed to those values and things that are important to you and matter to you, right?
yeah, yeah,
Not the
yeah.
opposite, right?
Yeah,
Which
I know.
oftentimes
See,
is.
yeah, it's like you have to accept two truths at the same time. If you accept that human beings are inherently valuable and
Yep.
infinitely valuable, then you
Yep.
must also accept that life is hard and you have to alleviate those hardships so that we can continue to celebrate life even in the midst of it all. So yes, very much so.
I'm very curious to find out, Nicole, through the experiences with your daughter and where she's at now, and I guess all the experience that you had from birth all the way. How has that, as I say, impacted your life, but in terms of your commitment or your focus or the things that you deem now important? How has that reframed all of that for you?
It's intensified it a lot.
Okay.
Um, because I see my daughter out in society, and
Hmm.
I have conversations with my older one about really what Cosette's experience look like. And so one could be of celebration and one could be of pity, right? So there's always these like
Choice.
diverging, right? And so I don't ever want my daughter to be pitiable. there's nothing to pity. There's nothing about her life that is sad or undesirable. And because I don't want that for her, I don't want that for anyone. And I also don't want her to feel as if she's a victim of fallen nature, because, you know, that's what happened, is something bad happened to her and it changed course of her life. But that doesn't have to define her. She gets to define her, and what her path is. And so not letting her circumstance hold her back because of what culture may say about her, and even define what value is, like how we add value to culture and society. It doesn't have to be in that box, right? So if I don't want that for my daughter, I don't want it for absolutely anyone. Yes. And so that's the world, that purpose I was telling you about. I'm like, I have to do something with it. I can't bear a life where she lives in that type of world. So yeah.
Well, I so love the commitment. It's resonating, and it's coming out loud and clear, and very, very powerful force that this has turned you into. And so that process of becoming who we're meant to be, it's very clear on you, right? It's very, very clear on you. And so congratulations for that, on all the work that you've done. I guess fabulous, and all the best to you and your daughter, and your entire family for that matter. For listeners that want to connect with you or learn more about your work, where can we send them, Nicole?
Yeah, so our website is dignitydefense.org. You can find, a contact form if you need help, any of our mission, as well as the podcasts. That's on there too. So
very cool. Very cool. Nicole, thank you so much for being here. It's been an absolute pleasure to learn your story, and all the best. All the best.
Oh, thank you so much for having me too.
Back, we are here on the podcast, and through Nicole's story, we are reminded that true strength lies in embracing life's difficulties and finding purpose in our struggles. By facing our challenges head on and advocating for what we believe in, we can transform adversity into empowerment and inspire others to do the same. Now, for more insights and want to check out Nicole, certainly I'd encourage you to check out the show notes below. That's where we've got all our contact details and ways you get involved in her advocacy work, which she's very, very passionate about. And clearly, if you've just watched, you saw it all. She really, again, her mission is to support the dignity and empowerment for individuals with disabilities, and she's certainly committed to their cause, and has the example of her wonderful daughter as living proof of why that's so important. Thank you for tuning into the Audacious Living podcast. If you've enjoyed today's episodes, please like, follow, subscribe, or share to help this podcast grow. And that's how we reach even more listeners, and together we can continue on this audacious journey of living our best lives. And I really want to thank you for being part of our community. Until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.